Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Dr. Zafar Chaudry, SVP and Chief Digital and Information Officer with Seattle Children's. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Dr. Chaudry, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, very good. Just real quick, everybody knows you. You're a celebrity, but a little bit about your organization and your role.
So Seattle Children's Pediatric Health System in the Pacific Northwest. We serve kids in Washington, Alaska, Montana, Idaho, across 47 sites with a core hospital of 407 beds.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to talk to you about sort of leadership today and staff management, change management, and all kinds of fun stuff. Why don't you give me the overview, the highlights of your career path, the major changes, that, and a little bit about why you made those changes at the time. Sometimes it's an opportunity comes to you. Sometimes you're sort of ready for a change and you go seeking it. Tell me about sort of the major milestones in your career, the big moves, and then we'll go from there.
Well, certainly the biggest move in my career was started my career as a physician and then defected to the dark side, as people say, moving into IT 5 or 6 years into that sort of course. And people say, well, why did you do that? It's because I became a physician because my family wanted me to be a physician, but I think I wanted to go down a different path. And in the early 90s, there was technology, and many clinical people didn't go into technology or even look at technology. So I sort of jumped into this early, been doing this for 38 years. And what I've sort of seen in my journey is change is inevitable, right? If you want to do the same thing day in, day out, maybe you can find a place where you can do that day in, day out. But typically, something is going to change, whether you're going to change roles, whether you're going to change responsibilities, whether you're going to change geographies. And I've done most of those things in my career, having worked in multiple health systems as well. So, what I've learned in the journey is health is the same no matter where you go, it's just funded differently. And you tend to still manage the same way. You, as a leader in a health system, leading a technology group, you're either going to be traditionalist, i.e., I just want to keep the lights on, doors open, or you're going to be one of those individuals that is employed to bring change when something isn't working the way leadership wants it to work. And I sort of found myself from career to career being a person who is hired to bring in change. So I come into an organization, you look at it and you say, well, things need to be fixed, whether it's systems, whether it's processes, whether it's becoming more cost efficient or lean. The challenge with my journey has been that if you do keep doing that from organization to organization, you become extremely unpopular because people don't tend to want to levitate to a person who says or states the obvious that this might be broken and we might have to do things in a different way. And if you've been in an organization for a really long time, you're used to doing things a particular way. So somebody like me comes in and says, oh, this system should work this way, or this should be consolidated, or we're oversubscribed with the number of people we have in a particular team. Those are very, very unpopular statements. Doesn't win you any prizes, gets you lots of bad reviews on Glassdoor if that's what you want to do. And you tend to find yourself in a very lonely position. I would say that being a leader in IT, if you're a change agent, is an extremely isolating and lonely position because very few people are fans of what you're doing. Most really dislike what you're doing and will try very, very hard for you not to be successful. And you have to have a level of resilience. And so, what I tend to find is it's easy to fall into, well, I'm not going to be that change agent. It's easy to fall into, let me just join the club. Because if I join the club, then I'll be liked. I'll be liked by my leadership going upwards, and I'll be liked by my colleagues downwards on the front line. But if you really want to see something different, you're going to have to fight and be that change agent. So I've certainly done that in my career from org to org. Hasn't made me very popular, and I've certainly taken my blows. And a lot of times, what people don't realize about being a leader in health IT is I don't think we wake up wanting to be unpopular, right? That's not the goal and dream that I have every day is I want to make people's life miserable, change their lives, but sometimes something has to change because what I think people forget, whoever works in any health system, is we're actually here to serve the health system. We're not necessarily here to serve ourselves.
Hmm.
So, what is right for my health system is what I have to think about every day. The needs of the org outweigh the needs of the individual. So if the org needs to be more efficient so it can see more kids, in the case of us right now, that's what I have to serve, right? Not can I retain myself? Can I retain everybody? Can I make no changes? Because that may not necessarily serve the organizational needs. And every org has a mission in health, and our mission is to serve the kids, make them better. And that's something that people tend to forget, especially if you've been in an organization for a really long time.
So if you're instituting change, theoretically, that's a mandate that's been given to you from the people you report to, right? And everyone talks about executive sponsorship of anything that you really want to get done, especially if it's going to meet with resistance, because you'll get that end around, so to speak, that people do, where someone goes above you who has a relationship with the CEO or the CFO and says, Dr. Chaudhry's making my life miserable, and you better fix this, so we're going to have a problem. So if you are a change agent, anyone who is a change agent, I assume has been given the mandate to affect that change. Now, the question is when push comes to shove, do they support you or do they say, well, Dr. Chaudhry, yeah, I told you we want to do A, B, and C, but it's getting a little hot in the kitchen. So maybe just do B and C and forget about A, which is completely deflating to someone like you or in your position who is trying to sort of follow the mandate they've been given. And now you say, well, what? Forget it. I'm not going to put my neck out anymore. Anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that happens a lot. I think to be a change agent, you have to give the messaging at least 7 times before it actually filters into anyone, right? And yes, absolutely. There's always escalations above you. People have relationships, they try to say and derail you. But what I've also learned in my journey is a lot of this depends on whether you yourself, as an individual, believe that you truly are a change agent. So anything shouldn't derail you if you truly believe in what you're trying to achieve. So, yes, you can try and communicate that to the people around you, why change has to happen, what is the benefit of that change. First time around, they won't like it. Second time, third time, you get to, time number 7, 8. Some will start, the first step in the 12-step program is admitting you have a problem, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to do in
Mm-hmm.
any organization. But I think it's all about keeping that drive going. So you're going to find certain individuals can be derailed, and certain individuals, even though you take your blows, will keep plugging away if you feel that you are doing the right thing, right? And hopefully, all of us in health work in health not for the financial gain because it usually isn't that gainful. They work for the fact that they believe in something and they want that something to actually happen for the greater good. So as a leader who claims to be a change agent, do I get derailed when I take my blows and knocks? Absolutely, right? You have good days and bad days, but you have to get back on the horse and say, I'm doing this for these particular reasons because those are the reasons I believe in. And then you keep going. But yeah, absolutely. Healthcare is an interesting culture. And it doesn't matter whether you work in pediatrics or adult healthcare, because I've worked in both. There is the underlying culture, then there is some toxicity, then there is some forward thinking individuals. So a change agent tends to align themselves with those individuals who could potentially support the improvement, because continuous improvement is something we should all think about, doesn't matter where we work, and not levitate towards the negativity that will always exist, right? It doesn't matter where you work. There's always going to be a percentage of negativity and a percentage of positivity. And there's going to be those people in the middle. You just have to figure out where to align yourself so that you keep moving towards the true North goal that has been set. So, yes, you do get the edict from the top, we need to do these things.
Mhm. Mhm.
But you as an individual first have to align whether you even believe in those things.
Mhm.
Because if you don't believe in something, you're never going to be able to sell it, right?
Mhm.
To yourself first versus anybody else. And what I've sort of found is if you're in a meeting and you truly don't get it yourself or don't believe in it, people will see right through you,
Mhm.
right? So that's some of the things I've sort of worked through over time is you've got to have some confidence in what you're doing.
Mhm.
You need a whole chunk of courage because you are going to get blows and you're going to get knocks along the way. But if you still keep thinking about that true north, you'll get there. And I sort of have a saying that says, if you think really big and you get halfway there, you've done really well in life.
Right.
In life, if not in work or any sort of change program.
Uh, Lots there. You use the term change agent a lot. Um, do you think that any IT executive in healthcare has got to have that as one of the main things they think about themselves or believe themselves to be? Do you think that's just a sort of it's got to be one of your top three if you're going to be successful in healthcare IT?
Yeah, I think in 2024, yes. I mean, if you look at the evolution of the CIO over the years, we've gone from being traditional people, keeping the lights on, doors open, doing the basics. We love data centers, we love flashy lights, we love network switches. We've evolved into systems, we've evolved into implementing systems and evolving systems and optimizing systems. And now, with the advent of cloud, AI, all the sexy terms that you hear, if we don't evolve, then who are we really? We're not really the transformational person that your CEO needs you to be because technology underpins everything we do, whether anybody wants to admit that or not, but it is true. Could we live without it? I mean, how many times can we actually put our phone down? We can't. We're sort of glued to it. The Gen Zs are absolutely glued to it. So you have to bring some level of change because whether it's personal or in business, doing more of the same isn't going to give you any form of success. I mean, in the last 10 years, how much has the world changed? Never mind the field of healthcare. I'm a guy from the era of green screens and memorizing keys on keyboards. And now I sit in a room and watch these kids use these devices with one eye open, and I can't even keep up. I get a new device, like a new phone, and I'm struggling for weeks trying to figure out where everything is. And I'm sitting next to a kid in the hospital, and the kid is absolutely crushing it
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
device. And I feel, truth be told, I feel embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old. I can't figure this thing out. And this kid over here is eating that phone for breakfast. And I'm just looking at it. And they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Why are you sort of struggling through this? I mean, I'll tell you that the so in pediatrics is an interesting space because the average 12-year-old here in pediatrics knows more than any CIO I know. They're super bright, they're digital, they're ready to go. So if I'm not the person who believes that I need to be different, my team needs to be different, then how will we actually be able to provide services for those people that we serve, right? If I still need my flip phone, I'm in serious trouble because I will not be able to understand what people need.
Yeah, yeah. I just had some thoughts as you were talking. You mentioned some stuff around the network and cloud, and I was thinking that changing technologies, if there are any, that don't really affect people, sort of behind the scenes stuff. That's fairly easy, right? We can do that. We can do that stuff. Changes that affect human beings is the hard stuff. And then we could break that down into two areas. When you're an IT person like yourself, leader, change that affects your IT team is one thing, somewhat manageable. They're IT folks, they're directly report to you. It's a little more influence there. The real hard stuff is change that affects people that don't report to you, the clinicians, the users. So that's one idea that I'd like you to discuss. And then another thing I've been thinking about, and this relates to the speed of change that I think you're referring to with these phones and whatnot. Um, so on an individual level, we can change if we choose to. If we're the ones deciding to make the change fairly quickly, it's almost exciting, right? When we find new things we want to do, new ways to do our work, we don't have to worry about propagating that across an enterprise or across people. When we want to change a workflow to a department or users, that's got to be like really formal, right? It's got to be documented. It's got to be here's how we did things and here's how we're going to do things. And it takes time and there's a rollout and adoption. But things are happening so fast is what I've been thinking that we can't do that once a year or once every 2 years. It's almost got to be constant, which is, I don't know if that's even possible. Anyway, wherever you want to go with that.
Well, I think what do people truly need if you're asking them to change, right? They need to know the why.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not very good at the why. And this applies personally as well as organizational wide. So I do agree with you that as technologists, we should be champions because technology is changing so fast it makes my head spin.
Yeah.
But actually, we're not, right? Most technologists are also resistant to the speed of change that we're seeing. So, as a leader in the space, your job as a leader of a team is to do two things. One is to show your team the why. And a lot of times you may end up agreeing to disagree
Mm-hmm.
because your view of the world might not be their view of the world, but at least you should attempt to show your team the why, whether it's speed of delivery needs to be faster or costs need to be leaner. They will disagree with you. And the same thing applies org wide. If clinicians are extremely smart people. We know this because they spend a lot of time going to school. They want to help people. They don't want to deal with all the other stuff. So, you, as the IT person in your organization, and that's why I say you are a change agent, your job, 20% of your job is sales. You have to go and show people the why. Dr. So and so, why do you need a new EMR or a new ERP or a new device to access a system? Or why do you need to log in multiple times or do two-factor authentication? Because they don't necessarily know the why. And physicians, nurses, allied health professionals, they're evidence-based people
Mm-hmm.
because that's how they practice. So if you can show evidence, if I can sit down with a group of doctors and show them the evidence that if you don't have security on your device, this is what's going to happen to the organization, they're going to eventually understand that. Now, they still might tell you, I'm not happy in the way you've set this up, but they won't fight you on the fact that having a cyber event could mean the end of clinical care for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and beyond. And none of them want patient harm. We all know that. So you've got to be able to connect the dots for people. What's in it for me? Why do I have to do this? And that message changes per audience. Speaking to a set of nurses is different than speaking to a set of physicians, is very different than speaking to a set of infrastructure people or applications people or desktop people. And I think that is the translation that leaders in IT now have to think about. how do you evangelize that? And I'm not saying you're going to win all those discussions, right? I tend to say, well, if you can get 80% of the people to try and see what needs to happen, you can move forwards because you're never going to win 100% of people. It's no different than being in a democracy, right? Not everybody's going to vote for what you're trying to do. You will lose some people along the way because they completely disagree with what you are doing, what your approach is, but you still need to keep moving towards that true north. And that's why it's important to align the technology function directly to the strategy of the health
Mm,
system, right?
mhm,
If your boss has articulated to you well enough what the strategy is, your job is to connect that strategy to what you do in technology. But the messaging is going to be, so very different for my own people versus out there in the community of the people that are serving the patients. So nobody, I don't think any of us in leadership wake up wanting to make people's life miserable. I think given, we've been given the charge by our leadership to do things. We won't win popularity prizes for some of the things we have to do. I mean, if you think about it right now, many health systems are struggling with margin. Margin, no margin means no mission, which means you have to run leaner. So you have to make difficult decisions, shrink down teams,
mm.
do managed services, think about not refreshing equipment, have longer refresh cycles. Lots of decisions have to be made. I cannot tell you that any decision I've made in the last 18 months has been popular with anyone. It hasn't. Truth be told, it's not even popular with me. I don't wake up every day thinking, oh my God, now I have to do something else, right? I don't want to do that. But at the same time, if I don't, our function won't exist and we won't be able to serve the organization in the way that we need to serve the organization. So I think that's something that a lot of frontline people don't understand about their leadership, right? We are not, I've not met a single human who woke up every morning saying, I live to make people's life miserable. I think sometimes you end up in that space because you're trying to balance what the org needs versus being kind to your own employees and colleagues. But it's a really difficult balance. I like to call this job, if I was to describe this job and the journey that I've taken, I would say I would describe it as juggling eggs.
Mhm.
I'm juggling eggs all the time. And guess what? If an egg drops, oh my God, you know what's going to happen. And periodically, it does drop because sometimes you don't win people over. You try hard and you don't win them over, and then they're very, very unhappy with you as an individual.
How do you process that? I mean, it's obviously sounds very difficult. So some of the people that I've met in these positions, I get the perception that this stuff rolls off their back, and I know it's not true, but it's sort of a hard edge, and you almost picture them acting very much like what is it, the Vulcan in Star Trek with the no emotion, where they would just like I picture them being in a meeting where they have to deliver bad news, and it's almost like it doesn't bother them because it's almost like facts computed in, necessary response is coming out. So there's no emotion in there. It's I've, based on my mandate and I put in the facts of what we need to do, and A plus B equals C, and that means you need to do X instead of Y, or you're fired. Have a nice, and there's just like they can do it without that internal turmoil. And I'm sure there is some still, but I just think that sometimes the people that do best in these jobs it just doesn't hit them.
Well, I think it may feel that way, and I think there may be a very small percentage of people in leadership who don't feel the emotion. I think what we end up doing is having the emotion before and after that event, but keeping poise in the event because what you can't do is lead a team if you are showing a meltdown yourself. So when I look at the work I do and I have to break bad news that people don't like pretty much all the time, I find these days, that I have that screaming moment before or after, right? Whatever language I would like to use in a secret room, I won't use that in front of a team of people because they need to see that I am composed
Mhm.
and focused, right? But do I wake up thinking this is what I want to do? No. Do I want to break bad news to people? No. I mean, whether it's in IT or when I was in clinical, even today, no physician wants to break bad news to a patient,
Mm.
right? It's not what they want to do, and they don't strive or live for it, but they have to do it. And the same thing in IT. We we do not want to tell people that they don't have a job. We don't want to tell people that they have to be leaner or more efficient or work more hours or the running joke these days, do more for less, because how many times do you hear that in a conversation? But I think you find ways to cope. Yes, do your team think, well, this guy must be a cold, heartless, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure they think that, but I don't think that's 100% true. There may be 10% of people who are good at managing their emotion or are cold and are just operators and don't see the person. But I don't see that that's that true, right? I mean, I people will probably say that about me, right? That he's very focused, cold, mean-looking individual. The reality is, every time I have to make a difficult decision, it breaks my heart. It
Mhm.
really does. I don't
Mhm.
want to do it. I see the people, I see the impact, I see the fact they have families to support. I don't want to tell someone they have to do another hour worth of work. I'd rather them spend that time with their families because that's the most important thing. And I myself, right? I don't do anything where I don't try to lead by example. So I'm not going to ask people to go above and beyond if I'm not doing that myself. My average day is so long, it makes my head spin. And if you asked my family, they would say I'm more married to the job than to them. And that causes problems for me personally.
Yeah.
And you sort of work through that. But most times, what I find is the people that work for you because you are that big behemoth sitting in the chair at the top don't ever sit down with you and even talk to you about, well, how do you feel? Truth be told, I worked in healthcare for 38 years. Very rarely has anybody ever sat in my office and said to me, whether that person reports to me or even my own people I report to, ask me, well, how do you feel? I don't tend to get that question. The question I tend to get is, why are you doing this to me?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right.
And
Right.
the thing is, I'm not doing it to you. I work for the same health system as you do, and the health system has to go in this direction. And unfortunately, I'm the person breaking that bad news, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to humanize some of this, and I don't always see that, right? Being a leader is not the easiest thing. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But if you've decided to take the charge in that space, you will take your blows. But I would also want people to know that, yes, I might be the mean looking person, the evil, but I'm not the evil AI, right? I'm just a person trying to do the job the best I can do the job. And will I make mistakes? Absolutely. Every leader makes mistakes. Will I admit to those? Yeah. I mean, I don't profess to know much about anything. I'm not perfect. I do try. I do try to communicate. And I think every leader tries to do that. So when people are sort of thinking through this, and you happen to be in the middle of an organization, try to think up and down, right? What is the
Mhm.
person dealing with upstairs
Yeah.
and downstairs? And then how does that impact you? And then you might be able to see a slightly different take on why things are happening around you and are not necessarily being done to you.
Yeah, it's a great point. You hope that people would look up to their leaders, and occasionally when they're dissatisfied with those leaders, they could look up with the same grace and understanding that they hope is granted to them. Sometimes it's not extended up, right? It's not extended up. It's the understanding, the grace, the maybe he was having a bad day, or he's just doing what he has to do, or maybe he just made a mistake and maybe he'll realize it down the road. Like not much of that comes up, and maybe that's just human nature. I don't know, but it is tough to deal with. And if you ever feel it from someone who reports to you, if you ever feel that grace, my God, to me, it's incredibly impactful and meaningful and appreciated.
Yeah, and I think fear overcomes things, right? So people are fearful. They don't want to have a conversation with you because you're the leader sitting in the big chair. But if anybody sat down with any leader and said, just outside of what's happening around us in work, you know, why? What is your why?
Hmm.
Right? I have
Hmm.
a why too, right? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing the difficult work? Why am I trying to give difficult messages? And how does it impact me? It does. I mean, I don't know anyone who's going to wake up and say, my goal is to destroy lives. It can't be, right? We're human. We do actually care about each other, although that might be something people don't think about, but we do. And so you're right. I mean, very rarely do you get the opportunity to tell people what is driving you. What you tend to do is spend your day firefighting some decision that has been made that you've had to articulate that people completely disagree with, and they center it around you.
Hmm.
You made the decision.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
all your fault. And they forget the context around you. They completely forget that. We
Yeah, I
all
mean, if
work for a system.
yeah, yeah, I mean, if you ever hear the words from someone who reports to you, hey, is there anything I could take off your plate or anything you need help with I can jump in on? That's nice. That's really
It's a
nice.
welcome. It's
Yeah.
a welcome.
Yeah.
It is so relieving
Yes.
sometimes when somebody says that to you,
Yes.
or you're in a corridor and somebody will stop you and say, like, are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've just gone through all this stuff. Are you okay?
Right.
Right? That really makes you feel really good when that
Yeah.
happens. And it does happen.
Yeah.
But most times you're viewed as enemy number one. And
Yeah.
people think the interesting thing is people think that if they can get rid of you, then the
Hmm.
problem goes away. And I always think of it this way, that if I'm the evil that you think exists and you eliminate this evil, there'll be even more evil coming down the path, right? So the grass isn't greener. Better the evil you know than the evil you don't know, right?
Right.
Because we do that as people, right? If I get unhappy, my first reaction is to say, well, let me just change orgs.
Hmm.
But I change orgs because I think that shiny toy over there is better than what I have. And then when I change an organization and touch that shiny toy for real,
Hmm.
I realize that shiny toy is kind of not very shiny.
Yeah.
It's just more of the same. So
Right.
a lot of people will attack you as a leader, hoping you'll go away or you'll get fired or you will leave, and then things will just be okay. Everything Zafar said about cost improvement will just poof, it will miraculously go away. And the next person will say, hey, it's no worries. We're flush with this. We're going to just. That never happens, doesn't Anthony? You know that.
No. No, it
But
doesn't.
people forget that, though.
All right. I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I just want to end on this note. We talk about the why, and we know that in these positions you get lots of arrows coming your way, and it can be lonely, as you mentioned, and a little isolating. You talked about the why, and when you're trying to affect change, explaining the why and your why, to keep in mind your why am I dealing with this when I could go over to the vendor side and get a whole boatload of money and then
Yeah.
go travel around and basically be on the road at conferences all the time and eating lovely food. But maybe it's harder work on the vendor side than that. I don't know. But the why. So let's talk about the why for a minute. You mentioned the patients, the kids. Earlier in this interview, you used the concept of, some of your why is so a couple more kids can be seen, as opposed to having to go somewhere else or having to wait longer for their appointments. I assume that's what you meant. That's a pretty
Yep.
impactful why, and that'll really keep you going through a lot of this. And healthcare has that where some industries don't. So that's an upside, the deep, deep meaning of what you do. If you can mentally tie it from a server or a cloud server to a child getting care, is that what keeps you moving forward? Is that your why?
Yeah, I think everybody who works in technology in the healthcare system is supporting that why, right? The mission of their organization. Even if they're fixing a server, let's be truthful, if the server doesn't work, systems can't be accessed, and that might impact patient care. So everybody in this team is doing that. That's why they work here. That's why they're not working on the vendor side. They're working on this side. Sometimes people forget that. Yes, that is my why. Because the way I look at this is I don't have young kids, but the reality is my team does, and they sometimes have to bring their kids. So I
Mhm.
don't wish any kid to be ill, but if they are ill, I want them to get the best care. And at some point, I might need care. And I hope that when I go to a health system, the people working in that health system will do the best so that I get the care that I need. So it's pay it forwards, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I try to do the right thing. My team does the right thing, which means clinicians do the right thing, and then they pay it forwards, meaning when I'm going to get sick, when I'm going to get older, inevitably that's going to happen. I go to a health system. I would hope that in that health system, the technologists are doing and providing the right system so those clinicians can see my scans, see my x-rays, see my lab results, give me the fastest and best care, and hopefully I can stay healthy. That's how I look at life, because ultimately what people forget is we are very fragile people as
Mhm.
human beings. The smallest illness can take us out of the game, right? And it doesn't matter how much money you make or what your title is, the smallest illness will take you down.
Yep.
So if we are here trying to support the people who make sure that those illnesses get treated or don't come at all in preventative care, that's the why. And when you forget that why, you sometimes have to remind yourself of that why. And I'll leave you with the fact that in a pediatric hospital, one thing I have seen is the courage of children. So even though you meet a child in the hospital who's suffering from cancer and is in excruciating pain and may die, they will still smile at you, and their life is so much more difficult than my life as an
Mhm.
IT technologist
Mhm.
trying to lead change. So that's how you remind yourself and you bring you back to your true north to say, no matter how difficult my life is or how many people dislike me or my decision making, that's why I'm doing it, that
Yeah.
hopefully that child will recover because we helped in some way, shape, or form. So that's, you've got to ground yourself back to what keeps you in this industry, because you're 100% right. You could do so much better on the other side.
Mhm.
I wouldn't agree with you on the food at the conferences, but I do think you could do better if you don't know what your why is.
Listen, they're not eating the conference food, the people I'm thinking of. They're on the company card at the restaurant with the 7-course meal. But no, you're absolutely right. Incredible interview, incredible discussion. I think this is going to be really, really helpful to a lot of your colleagues who are dealing with the things you're dealing with and just bottling it all up and internalizing it. And, so just to know that others are feeling what they're feeling. I think it's wonderful you shared this today. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.